Hello, I'm River, and welcome to my Devil May Cry board game, The Bloody Palace paint series. On today's episode, I'll be painting the Hell Antenora, one of the enemies encountered during the Bloody Palace. There are 4 of these little guys in all. They kind of have the appearance of a hanged man with a noose and a bag over their head, brandishing 2 cleavers. I begin by using my hobby knife to trim away some of the mold lines that I found. They are primarily located on the legs, the arms, and sometimes along the side of the body. The more difficult part of this was where the mold line goes over the pant leg, where there are several ropes and fabric overlapping, which creates a little bit of trouble, but I do the best that I can to remove as much as I can. It takes me about 5 minutes each model to remove the excess plastic. After I've trimmed up the models, I take them out back and give them a nice spray of matte black from Army Painter. Once they're nice and primed, I leave them overnight to set. The only trouble with priming is the back cleaver kind of is obscured by the rest of his body, but that's easy enough to finesse. I start with lich skin to base coat the flesh of the Hell Antenoras. Every paint in this video is applied with 2 thin layers. It is very important to have maximum coverage and an even look. I coat the entire bulbous body of the Hell Antenora, but I leave the 2 spikes jutting from its back black, because I feel like it would look weird if you had fleshy points sticking out. And I left them black so that it's maybe horns or something along those lines. Once the skin's covered, I take my Bugbear Brown to go ahead and begin base coating all of the cloth and rope all over the body. In the picture, it's difficult to say whether the head has a bag over his head or if it's just long hair, but I assume it's a bag and go with the brown. I go ahead and I paint over all of the ropes and the leather on the pants and arms and legs. Later, I will be changing the color of the ropes, but the brown is a good base. It's alright to be a little sloppy, as you can clean up any extra spillage later. Next up, I take my rough iron and go ahead and paint each cleaver, both sides, along with the blade, the jagged teeth on top. If you want, you can apply it thick and have it fill in the sort of scratches and crevices along the sides of the cleavers, or you can go much more thinner and leave them darker. Next up, I take purple and red to create a little bit of a mix. It's almost like a magenta or maroon. Hell Antenoras have these gross, wiggly tentacle things coming out of their bodies. The models don't reflect this in any way, but I figured I can go ahead and kind of freehand paint them on, just to give them a little bit of variation so that they're not just big gray blobs. Go ahead and on each model feel out where you want these weird tendril bulbous mounds to appear on them. And I do it different for each model. Next, I will take my shadow wash and my flesh wash and mix a 3-2-3 mixture of shadow, flesh, and water, in that order. You may want to mix up your own concoction if that doesn't suit your needs. For example, adding less water if you want it to be a darker appearance, or adding more flesh wash if you want it to be more kind of grody, and then more shadow wash if you want it to appear darker. You want to make sure that the wash is evenly distributed and doesn't pull too much in any one area. If the wash does begin to pull too much in a spot, you can go ahead, dry your brush off a little, and use it to kind of pull away and spread it more evenly throughout. I then come back with the Lichkin so that I may begin highlighting. I go back over some of the more prominent parts of the Hell Antenora's body, parts that I would think would catch the light the most, and give them a little bit of a highlight. I hit some of the mounds on the shoulders, as well as the arms, and to just accentuate the musculature of the creature. Go ahead and make sure the knuckles are very carefully highlighted. Biceps, triceps. You want to avoid getting the highlights in the recessed parts, so that you can keep the shadows sharp. Each finger and knuckle can be very carefully highlighted with the edge of the brush, and avoid the paint entering in between the fingers. The Hell Antenora's ribcage sticks out very prominently through its back, along with its spinal column. These are great spots to highlight each vertebra and bone. I come back with my brown, and I go ahead and I highlight the highest points in all of the cloth. The bag over the face has many ridges, which are very easy to pick out from the rest of it. Again, you want to avoid painting any of the shadowed areas to make the shadow effect stay realistic. I go and I make sure to highlight all of the handles as well as the leather wrist grips. I come back with my Otyugh brown, and I take my detail brush, which as you can see is kind of falling apart. And after properly watering down and drying off my brush, I very carefully and delicately go back over all of the ropes to give them a much more outstanding effect. There are ropes found on the wrist guards, the pants, the noose around the hangman's neck, as well as around the calves and the feet of the creature. Using the side of the brush, I very carefully go over the ropes to make sure that each of the rope's knots remain visible. Coming back with my mithril silver, I hit the teeth of the meat cleaver, as well as sort of the edge of the blade. I do light at first, but later on I take up more and more of the cleaver on different models. This part you can do more so to your taste. The silver will mostly be covered up later by the green effect that the in-game model has. I also don't forget to highlight the little bolt that holds the handle together. I do this for each of the models. Just a tiny bit of silver. Next up, I come back with my Dragonfire Red. And I'm gonna kind of put a tiny little red streak, kind of like some nasty vein or worm, moving through the creature's body. I go over to all of the recently purpled spots on each creature's back and body, and kind of make them spread out in little veining arches that fork and twist between its body. By the time I finished, I had realized that I had done more red than purple, but I think it ended up looking pretty good. It really makes it pop when it's finally on the board. Again, you want to try to use the edge of your brush if you're doing kind of fine details on these sharp points. That way you have just enough of the brush touching without spreading too far. Next, I take my green and kind of water it down a lot. And then I come back, highlight all the silvery parts on the blade. I'm not quite sure what the hell Antenora has on the end of its cleavers. It seems to be just some gross stank coming off of it. But regardless, I think that the green gives it a little bit more life. And it's more noticeable when it's out on the field. After I was finished, I kind of took a long look at him and was like, you know what? I don't think those ropes look nasty enough. So I go back in and with my flesh wash and just kind of nast up the ropes a little. Revisit each of the Hell Antenoras, applying a only slightly watered down flesh wash to all of the ropes. The belt, the noose, around the wrist guards, and the legs and feet. You can see here about the weird growths that I painted purple and red kind of stand out from the rest of the creature's gray body. I thought this was a really good effect to use because you really don't have a lot of color from the Impusa. And I hit the bases with a bit of black, just to sharpen up and make sure I fix any mistakes that would appear on the bottom. And with that, my Hell Antenoras are done. I actually threw them on the board the next day and played a bit of the Bloody Pals board game with my friends. And that about wraps it up. Next video, I'll be doing the Scudo Angelo, which comes in a pack of 4, and they are fairly simple silvery knight demons. If you have any questions, I'd say leave a comment below and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Like and subscribe if you wish to follow the paint series. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.